Hello, and welcome to the Catholic Leadership Puzzle Podcast. It's based on my book, Solving the Parish Puzzle. For those of you who aren't aware, I've been doing this work for quite a while, and it is such a wonderful opportunity to be able to have guests on. And today, I have a really great guest, Richard McCorry, who he focuses on one of the pieces of the puzzle that I talk about, particularly hospitality, but he's done his own work. He's written his own book. And I just wanted to welcome you to the show, Richard. Thanks so much for coming on.
Well, Christina, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate this opportunity to talk about something that I'm really passionate about.
Oh, I can tell just from the work that you do, the fact that you want to be able to have this discussion with Catholic audiences, I think is very, very important, especially in our world today that really is trying to divide us and to discourage us. And you talk about hospitality, and but before we jump into that, would you share a little bit about your own faith journey and how you came to be doing what you're doing today? Mhm.
Sure. Yeah, appreciate that. Well, I'm a cradle Catholic. Um, Became an altar boy in the second grade and learned the Latin Mass. So that gives you a sense of how old I am. Um, but then, like many teenage Catholics, I got confirmed and stopped going to church. Never lost my faith, just didn't actively practice it. It was in my late 20s that I had my own personal dark night of the soul and cried out to God for help, and God answered. And I'm forever grateful for God answering that prayer during the darkest time of my life. And consequently, I've shaped my life since then to reflect how grateful I am to God for answering those prayers. Over the years, I've served in a number of settings in parish ministry, diocesan work, pastoral planning, teaching, speaking, disaster spiritual care, and most recently as a per diem chaplain in a hospital setting.
Mhm.
And across all of those experiences, I have seen how deeply people need to be received and listened to and reminded that they're not alone. That has really shaped a lot of the work that I've done, whether I'm speaking about change or gratitude or recovery or parish hospitality. The heart is really the same. God meets us in the concrete experiences, circumstances of our lives, and we're called to be instruments of his welcome, mercy, and hope for other people.
Mm, beautiful. I couldn't have said that better myself. And it's something that really resonated with me when I came across your work. And I was like, we need to have a conversation because this is the kind of things that we need to be speaking about within our communities. We need to, I'm not saying that metrics like, hey, how big was the offertory this week, or how many people did we confirm this year. But the reality is that so often people will come into our communities and no one will even notice.
Mm,
Unfortunately, too many times they won't even be spoken to.
yeah,
It's just kind of like they slip in, they slip out, and that was a lost sheep potentially.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, so, but you wrote a book, about this, entitled "Companies Coming: A Spiritual Process for Creating More Welcoming Parishes." And you know, how did you even become interested in trying to help parishes become more welcoming communities?
Yeah, well, it began in the late 90s. I
Mm,
started working on helping people to come up with spiritual tools to help them deal with changes that were going on in the church, specifically the closing and emerging of parishes. I
mm,
learned that we lose up to a third of parishioners when a church is closed or merged. And I tried to think about what are some of the spiritual tools that we could use to help them. So that
Mhm.
was the focus of my work in the late 90s and early 2000s. And then around 2007, it occurred to me that we need to begin also thinking about the churches that survive
Mhm.
closing or merging, and what were the needs of those churches. And of course, the first thing that came to mind to me was that they need to be welcoming
Mhm.
parishes, warmly receiving those people that were coming from churches that were closed.
Mhm.
I have visited a number of Catholic churches over my lifetime, and my most common experience is what you described. I feel like I'm invisible, like my presence really doesn't make any difference to anyone.
Right.
Occasionally, I'm made to feel downright unwelcome,
Mm.
like when I get a dirty look because I ask somebody sitting at the end of an empty pew, could I get by you?
Mhm.
Or because I'm sitting in somebody else's seat. And then rarely, all too rarely, I have been made to feel welcome. And
Mhm.
that's what I'm trying to, what I've been trying to bring about through the book that I wrote and through the work that I did. That
Mhm.
book, by the way, came out of a uh, pilot project that we ran in the Diocese of Brooklyn
Mm.
on a process to create more welcoming parishes, and then I wrote that book.
Mhm. Yeah, you describe, about, your own experience. I've had that same experience, because I've been all over the place and travel. But when you find that hospitality, that welcoming, it stays with you.
Oh
And you're
yeah.
like, wow, what were they doing? And what I have kind of found is that it isn't necessarily what they're doing, but how they're being,
Hmm.
of how they're
Hmm.
interacting, of how they are open to new people, and how they are open to engaging with their brothers and sisters in Christ.
Yep.
Um, so kind of from before we kind of maybe talk some practicals. You advocate that hospitality is central to parish life, and what might you tell someone who's going, oh, it doesn't really make a big difference?
Oh my. Well, I'd love to have that challenge of somebody to say that. Uh, Hospitality for me is central to parish life because it's central to the gospel. I mean,
Mhm,
in Matthew, Jesus says, I was the stranger and you welcomed me. He doesn't present that as an optional activity. He identifies himself as the stranger. And so we are called, by my understanding of that gospel, to see Christ in all strangers that come into our church. It's more than just a nice practice, it's part of our faith, it's central to our faith. Uh, and beyond Matthew and throughout Scripture, there is hospitality is treated as a sacred responsibility. Abraham and Sarah welcomed the strangers and encountered God's promise, and we're still living in the glow of that promise by
amen.
our faith. The widow of Zarephath shared what little she had with Elijah, and she made it through the famine. Again
Mhm,
and again, God calls his people to welcome the stranger, the outsider, the vulnerable, and the person in need.
mhm,
For me,
yeah,
Catholic parishes, hospitality is not just a simple way of increasing attendance or improving morale or increasing the weekly collection, although those things may happen. Our deepest motivation has to be gratitude.
mm,
We welcome because first we were welcomed by God.
mhm,
We make room for others because God has made room for us. We
mm,
receive the stranger because, in some mysterious way that we can't really explain, Christ is present in that person. That's
mhm,
why I believe hospitality is central to
yeah.
Catholic parish life.
No. Do you run across people, and I couldn't agree more with what you're saying. But do you run across people that kind of have misconceptions about what hospitality is supposed to be?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, they think it's, just a friendly practice. That's
Hmm.
what hospitality is all about. But it's so much deeper than that. It's a spiritual position that we take. Another big misconception is that the hospitality is just the job of the greeters or the
Hmm.
hospitality committee if you have one. Greeters matter,
Hmm.
ushers matter, coffee hours matter, a welcoming committee matters, but hospitality cannot be delegated to a small group of volunteers. It has to become part of the culture of the whole parish. And I come back to this over and over again in my book and in my work is that your best hospitality committee is your entire parish, not
Hmm.
just that small group of people tasked with being hospitable. And this is one of the reasons why. When I'm greeted by a greeter, that's nice. It makes an impression upon me. But when I'm greeted by the person sitting next to me, pew,
Hmm.
and made to feel welcome, that is the beginning of a wow experience for me. And
Yeah.
that's why I really believe that hospitality needs not to be put in the hands of a small group of people, but it requires a culture change in our parishes so that
Hmm.
everybody feels like they are the welcoming committee.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. It's definitely a piece of what we need to be attentive to as a community, is that welcoming. I love the fact that you state that you absolutely hate programs, and you talk processes, and I am so the same way. Anybody who's been around me at all, they're just like, oh no, don't say it's a program. It better be a process.
Yes, yes,
Oh,
absolutely. Well,
yeah.
and this is a kind of a first frustration that I do run into in my work is that I suggest a process, and I have a process that's been tested and it works, but it's not quick. It takes a while. I mean, a culture change doesn't happen overnight. You really have to go through a process. And I have had pastors and people on hospitalities committee say, don't tell me about all that process stuff. Just tell us what we got to do.
Mhm.
Well, you see, I believe if I tell people what they have to do, and of course I got some suggestions about what they
Mhm.
can do, but that the ultimate effect of that is going to be very short lived.
Right.
It's going to go on for a little while, and then they'll move on to another program or something,
Mhm.
some other thing may come up in the parish that becomes more important, and it'll kind of just drift away, and nobody will ever even notice that it's gone away.
Mhm.
But the process helps to change the culture. And once again, the culture needs to be that the whole parish is responsible for welcoming, because that stranger, once again, is Christ.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Have you noticed that a program does not necessitate you understanding why you're doing the program, but a
Yes,
process will not work if you don't understand why you're doing it.
that's right. That's right. And the process that I suggest for creating more welcoming parishes
Mhm.
involves teaching the whole parish why it is that we're doing it. That's the really the main question is why. And
Yeah.
once you understand why and you really grasp it, that this is
Mhm.
Christ that we're welcoming in the
Mhm.
stranger,
Right.
then it's a compelling argument, I think.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to what Saint Mother Teresa of Calcutta always spoke of where people are like, "How can you go and take care of people in the streets?" And it's like, "I'm taking care of Christ." Yeah. That's Christ. And I think you're absolutely spot on. You made mention that you have steps in your process. Could you walk us through those?
Sure. Just real briefly, the
Hmm.
first step, believe it or not, is to assemble a team. But now this team is not the team that we just devote to hospitality, but it's their job ultimately to work themselves out of a job. Their
Mm,
job is to enter into this process and help to form the parishioners, to form them and inform them
hmm.
about becoming more welcoming people. The second step of the process is to develop a communication plan because that's the heart and the soul of this process is to
Amen.
communicate to communicate with folks why why it matters, and how hospitality connects with the gospel.
Hmm.
Communication is not an afterthought; it's part of the formation.
Hmm.
The third step is to assess the current reality. So,
Oh
what
yeah.
is the reality of this parish when a stranger walks in? And so, I actually recommend that they have strangers
Hmm.
and come to the parish and report back to them the experience that they had. The second part of the assessment is to assess the parishioners themselves in terms of how important is welcoming to you, and how important do you think welcoming should be to the parish. So to determine the current reality, the next
Hmm.
step of the process is to discern God's vision for this parish in terms of welcoming. What kind of a welcoming community is God calling them to be?
Mm,
And the reason why we discern God's vision is because it raises our vision above our own self-centeredness
hmm.
that we naturally have. Once we have identified the current reality and God's vision, assuming that they're not aligned, we come up with a plan. How do we get from that current reality to God's vision for this parish? Once we develop that plan, then we implement it.
Hmm.
And as we're implementing it, we're also continuing to evaluate whether it's
Hmm.
working or not. And we keep improving as time goes on. Hospitality is not a one-time campaign. It really is an ongoing commitment.
Hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love, what you're talking about, because, these are the pieces of the puzzle that I stress and emphasize, about the fact that everybody needs to know what, they're supposed to be doing. Evangelization, and part of evangelization is welcoming Christ, welcoming the stranger. We can't if we don't encounter and engage with the people, it's kind of hard to be able to then share the good news with them. But
Well, yeah,
then communication. Go ahead.
yeah. We just this past weekend we had the parable of the sower and the seed. So I
Hmm.
love that imagery, and and absolutely, hospitality is like cultivating the ground so
Hmm.
that it's ready to receive the seed, which is the word of God,
Hmm.
and the stranger, the
Right.
newcomer that comes to the parish. Um, I can't imagine going door to door in our local communities and inviting people to come into church if we haven't, first of all, solved the issue of welcoming.
Right.
To have them walk in and be ignored
Hmm.
is it makes no sense. So the absolute groundwork of evangelization is
Hmm.
hospitality.
Amen. Definitely, that, and combined with that, of course, as you said, is communication. And
Yeah.
so often people think that communication is just about, sharing information, but as you stressed, hey, no, it's not just sharing the information. It's also about knowing who it is that we need to be, contacting, and who it is that needs to be involved with this. And so often people don't realize that it's not just transmit, it also has to be receive, and that's where assessing the
Yes.
reality. Oh, My goodness, it, it's really hard. I'm an athlete. I'm a golfer. Have done long distance, marathons, that kind of thing.
Wow.
And it's something of, if you don't know where you are now, it's really hard to get any better.
Yeah.
And there really seems to be this huge resistance, not necessarily just within our culture, as a whole, but especially within our parish communities seem to be very resistant to being able to look at themselves honestly and say, the Lord knows exactly who you are right now. He knows that your attitude is not a generous one when somebody sits down next to you and you don't know them. The Lord already knows that, but he
Yeah.
wants to meet you where you are, and he wants to help you become more like him.
Yeah.
But if you can't accept, the fact of, yeah, I probably am not very welcoming, you know, if we're not able to accept that, it's hard to change it. But
And one
particularly,
of the I'm
mhm.
sorry, one of the
No, you're good.
hurdles here is that people really do think that their parish is welcoming because
Yeah.
they feel welcomed,
Hmm.
because they've been known there for years, and they
Right.
have their circle of friends and everybody knows them and it's a very welcoming environment, but not so for the stranger.
Yeah.
But people
No,
don't want to know that.
exactly. Because, when we know something, then we are presented with, you have to make a choice. Are you going to continue this way, knowing what you know, or are you going to try and bring about change? And no one wants to go through the pain and effort of change. Nobody
Yes.
signs up for it, unless you're crazy people like myself. I'm always looking, and saying, no, tell me, how can I get better? Because I want to become fully who the Lord has created me to be, and I can't do that when I have blind spots. We all have blind spots,
Right.
all of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. No
But
question about it.
so what role do you think parish leadership plays in creating this culture of welcome?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's impossible for a parish to exceed the limitations of their pastor. So
Mm,
if a pastor is not on board with hospitality, it's going to be a tough uphill fight to implement this process. The parish leadership is essential there to be on board with this process. The pastor's visible support matters greatly,
mhm,
but hospitality can't rely on the pastor alone, but it's got to begin with
mhm,
him. Parish staff, the pastoral council, ministry leaders, ushers, greeters, catechists, musicians, volunteers. Everybody is can help to shape a culture of hospitality. But the
mhm,
leaders, pastors, are the ones that help keep the gospel vision
mhm,
alive for the community. They remind the parish that hospitality is just not about being nice.
mhm,
It's connected to discipleship, evangelization, belonging, and the mission of the church. Leaders also set the tone. If
yeah.
a leader communicates clearly, listens carefully, invites participation, and models welcoming themselves, the parish begins to understand then that hospitality is not a side issue. It's
Mhm,
part of who we are called to be by the gospel.
yeah. No, I'm thinking of a parish where I think the pastor, and his parochial vicar model that openness, to being hospitable, and welcoming beautifully, because on their main website, it does the welcome newcomers, here are your first steps kind of thing. And one of those is, make an appointment with one of our shepherds, you know, call the office, make an appointment in order to sit down with them. And I was in a situation, I'm like, okay, so I did. And it turns out that the pastor has specific time during the week, specific appointments, of where, he set aside that time. That speaks volumes to
It does.
everybody. That,
Absolutely.
hey, the pastor believes this is so important that he's taking a part of his week in order to make sure that he's available.
Absolutely.
And so I think you're absolutely right. Leadership is key, but what is something that perhaps parishioners sitting in the pews, what might be a couple of practical first steps maybe they could take in order to try and encourage a little bit more hospitality and welcoming?
Well, I think the best thing that they could do is to begin to look through the eyes of a stranger. My
Mm,
recommendation when I do this training in parishes, I give people homework, and the homework is go to a church that you've never gone to before, where they
mhm,
don't know you, and pay attention to how you are received. In fact, I even recommend that they consider going to a non denominational Christian church, one of the mega churches, and pay attention to
mhm,
how they are welcomed. Um, that's I think a first step. There's
mhm,
a reason why 43% of those who were raised Catholic no longer identify with being Catholic. And welcoming and hospitality, I think, could be a big reason for that.
mhm. Yeah, I tie it to not being seen, known, and loved.
Yeah.
And so I dealt with it a lot with when we were working. My husband and I, we worked with confirmation students and ran the confirmation program, for a number of years. And probably the biggest thing that the young people, and these are freshmen and sophomores in high school, and they would tell us afterwards how much it meant knowing that when we would see them around the parish and we call them by name and or just recognize them and say, "Hey, how is it going?" That was huge. And then when we didn't see them, we always made it a point to, "Hey, is everything okay? Didn't see you this weekend." And then we'd find out like, "Oh yeah, we had an out of town soccer tournament or something like that." But they were missed.
Yeah.
And how often is it that people, and this is not just welcoming the stranger and newcomers, but also longtime parishioners. How often is it, you brought up the 43rd 43% of Catholic, those who are raised Catholic and have drifted away. How many of those people drift away and no one noticed?
Yeah. Absolutely.
um you know the sheep went lost and nobody went looking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's something for us to remember too, is that it's not just about newcomers, but it's also about those who are already here
Yep.
and recognizing so we don't neglect them.
Yep.
Is there anything else that we should be, looking, to be attentive to make sure we don't neglect longtime parishioners?
Well, yeah, it's not an either or. It's not,
Mhm.
you welcome new people and you ignore the old timers. It's a both and. Because
Right.
Christ is present in all of us,
Hmm.
the longtime parishioners and the newcomers. Uh, when I work with a parish, I want to get those longtime parishioners on board and help them to recognize that their ministry, that they're called to, is the ministry of welcoming and hospitality, and to have them on the lookout for that new face that's walking into the parish and have them go up to them and introduce themselves to them and to make them feel welcome and introduce them to other people and to the
Hmm.
pastor and get them incorporated into the life of the parish. So,
Hmm.
uh, getting them on board with the process and helping to convert them, I think, is a really good first step.
Hmm. Totally agree. You're never going to be able to please everybody. Everybody's going to be, there's always going to be somebody that is not happy that things aren't the way they always quote have been. But the fact is that everything is always changing. and it's just a perception we have that things haven't changed. But
Yeah.
are there any last words that you would want to leave with people, particularly Catholic leaders, who want their communities to become more, like places that in which people feel that they belong? Any last words for them?
Sure. Well, uh, number one, don't reduce it to a program because it's not a
Hmm.
program, it's a process. Uh, Hospitality is a gospel responsibility and a spiritual practice. I think the best way to end this, Christina, is for me to share with you a wow experience that I had
Hmm.
in a parish that I worked in. It was in the Diocese of Brooklyn, and I went there. My job was I was a secret shopper. Okay,
Yeah.
so I went there. Nobody knew me. I mean, because I live in Rochester, New York, so that's 500
Hmm.
miles from Brooklyn. And the first thing that happened in this parish was I was welcomed by the greeter. Now, I
Hmm.
mention that because that doesn't always happen. I've
Very
gone to a
true.
lot of churches where the greeter looks at me, sees me as a stranger, and then averts their eyes
Hmm.
and looks for somebody that they know to
Right.
greet and have a
Hmm.
conversation with. So just having the greeter
Hmm.
acknowledge me, welcome me, and talk with me for a moment it made an impression. And then, of course, I grabbed the bulletin like we always do at the beginning of Mass, and I'm looking at it ahead of time. One half of the front page of this bulletin was devoted to welcoming the stranger. In
Mm.
fact, they had the Catholic bishop's prayer. Uh, it was developed in 2000 along with the pastoral letter on welcoming
Hmm.
the stranger. It had a prayer of welcoming the stranger. And then at the bottom of that prayer, it said, if you're new to the parish, please write your name here and contact information, and we'd like to reach out to you
Hmm.
and put it in the book and put it in the collection. So I
Right.
did that, filled out the thing. Uh, Mass began, and right at the beginning of the homily, probably not according to the rubrics, but nevertheless, the pastor got up and he said, is there anybody who's here for the first time? If you wouldn't mind, could you stand up,
Hmm.
please? And I stood up, and I think one other person stood up. Church erupted in applause. People came over, welcomed me. The usher came over. He had a packet of information that he gave me
Hmm.
information about the church. When we got to the prayers of the faithful,
Hmm.
the way this parish ended the prayers of the faithful was by praying this prayer of hospitality for the stranger.
Mm.
I didn't know that prayer, and I'm fumbling through the missal looking for it. And the lady standing next to me saw my confusion,
Hmm.
and she pointed to the back cover of the missal where this prayer
Hmm.
was prayer. And she
Yeah.
had a beautiful smile when she
Hmm.
did that too. And that really made an impression on me
Hmm.
that the woman next to me was recognizing my distress and reached out to me. During the exchange of peace, many people came up, welcomed me. After the mass was over, once again, people came up, said hello, welcome.
Hmm.
Pastor came up, said hello, welcome. And this was really beyond a wow experience.
Hmm.
And then 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm driving back home from Brooklyn to Rochester,
Hmm.
and the phone rings.
Oh, wow.
It is the pastor
Hmm.
responding to that coupon that I
Right.
put in the collection,
Hmm.
welcoming me to the parish and wanting to know what information he could give me.
Mm.
Absolutely blew me away.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It was beyond a wow experience.
Hmm.
And oh, boy, if we could only have all our parishes that way.
Yeah.
I feel like I died and went to heaven.
Hmm. No, and for many people, that might be their only time that they encounter a community that's following Christ, let alone a Catholic community. And for us to take advantage of all those opportunities, yeah, you're right. That's absolutely awesome. I can't believe our time is already up. It's been
Oh,
such a pleasure talking with you today, Richard. Where can people go and learn more about you and the work that you're doing?
well, they can go to my website,
Hmm.
which is CatholicHospitality.com. And there it's got
Fascinating.
a lot of information about my books and speaking topics and resources for parishes
Hmm.
and Catholic leaders. My book, of course, Company's Coming, A Spiritual Process for Creating More Welcoming Parishes. The second edition of that book is going to be coming out soon. I first published the book in 2008, and
Hmm.
I've just updated it recently. So the second edition will be coming out probably within a month or two.
Hmm.
I speak on hospitality and parish renewal and leadership and helping Catholic communities respond faithfully to what God is asking of all of us. I'd be grateful to hear from any parish leaders or diocesan leaders who want
Hmm.
help with creating more welcoming communities.
Hmm. Well, it definitely is a needed, service, because we kind of hit or miss out there right now, as we all experience. And I think even if we ourselves were just to go and to assess our own reality, go someplace and experience it, through the eyes of a stranger, that process, and then to really look at ourselves. What are my attitudes, towards others? Am I willing to even engage with somebody that is new, within in my community? I think is all things that we can be doing in order to cultivate a more welcoming, community, but especially so that we really can honor the gospel reality, as you said, that welcoming the stranger is not optional.
Yeah,
It is our gospel responsibility. So,
yeah,
but Richard,
absolutely.
it has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show
Well,
and
thank you,
for,
Christina. It's been my pleasure speaking with you. It really has.
oh, well, thank you. And for everyone out there, know my continued prayers for each of you that you may be able to do whatever it takes so together we can tell the master of death, not today. God bless everybody.